Today we're going to go through a tutorial where we create a smart component or a smart part, and we see how we can use a highly configurable smart part to make at least somewhat complex system. So this is an introduction to smart parts. We're going to begin by creating a copy of a template that we have available for creating smart parts. So this smart part template, we're going to copy the workspace, and we're going to call this a smart part tutorial. And so that we don't clutter up our workspace, we're going to move that to a place where we play. So it's not going to be one of our smart parts. It's going to be inside playing. We're going to move it there so it's out of our way. And we don't confuse this with a part that's ready to be used in other features. Inside a smart part, there are always two tabs. One tab is the Feature Studio, which is what we're looking at currently, and the other tab is the Part Studio, where the part is actually drawn. And we see that here we already have a part that is drawn. There's a tank that is showing up. So what I'd like to show you next is that in this Part Studio, this feature list is essentially lines of code that actually create feature script code that are executed and that end up then creating what we see in the Part Studio. Now we can adjust how much of this code is executing by moving this rollback bar around. And we can move it all the way back to the very top where the only thing that's defined is a coordinate system. And when we do that, everything disappears. And just to demonstrate this, let's go look at the variables that are defined so far in this Part Studio. And we see that this table is completely empty. Now let's move this rollback bar past this first feature, which is called template 1. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of parameters show up, a whole bunch of variables show up, including one that is called tank1, and it's got lots of things defined. It's got freeboard and height of water and a length defined and many more things that we can't see because there's no space for it to show up. If we roll back this rollback bar all the way to the bottom of our lines of code of the various features that are available, we get a superdrive, and that superdrive is creating this tank that shows up here. And look, over here in this tank, it says that n equals 2, and indeed, if we look inside this tank, there are 2 tanks here. So that's connected somehow. We are going to do lots of work inside this smart part tutorial, and so we want to name this for what it really is. So this feature that at the bottom here where it says template, we're going to really want to call this smart part tutorial. And that's actually true for things that are throughout this feature. So there's a template tree here. There's a template pre-designer. And so we can do a little trick, and we can use search and replace, and we can search for template. And we can replace that with, well, what do we want to call this? How about we call this Smart Part Tutorial? And we'll replace all 9 of those instances, just like that, all. And down here where it says, everything is done. Okay, so let's commit this. And now let's look and see what damage we've done. We go over here and, oh no, it's all broken. Nothing is working. And I guess we could look at the feature script notices and, oh goodness, there's no matching function. And up here, it says the definition of this custom feature was not found. Well, the reason that this feature was not found is because we changed the name and there no longer is a feature called template. So let's roll back our rollback bar. Let's delete that template. And let's insert whatever is available currently. We may have to give it a minute to show up. There it is, Smart Part Tutorial. And we can say OK. And now everything is back again. OK. And now, if we look in the template, feature script notices, and why don't we change the name of this too? So this is going to be Smart Tutorial. Okay. So what we see is that there are a whole bunch of complaints about warning of required input. Freeboard is not found. And so it's used defaults instead. So this is showing one of the powerful features of smart parts, that if they don't get the required inputs, they don't worry, and instead they just use the default value so that they can at least show you something. And they give you intelligent messages here in the feature script notices telling you what else you need. And then there's this helpful thing here where it says, copy the string below into the overrides configuration to provide the required inputs. So if we wanted to provide all of the inputs for this feature in the override string, we could do that. The override string is right here, and this is how we can pass variables into a feature. And when we do that, everything is fine. And we could go up here, and for example, we could go and we could say, let's change the number of tanks that we have here. And oh, how many do you want to make? Let's make 10 tanks. So if we change that to 10 tanks, all of a sudden now we have 10 tanks. So we can control this feature using the inputs in the override string. But we want to take this one step further. We would like to be controlling this through the code that we write. And so for right now, I'm going to delete these inputs, and it's going to revert to the defaults. It's going to give us all these warnings. And now we're going to go over to the Smart Part Tutorial feature script code, and let's look at what we have here. So there are like four sections to this code. First one at the very top, we import code that we need to do this design. There's a standard Onshape library, and there's the place where we have lots of useful Agua Clara code for smart parts that we import with just one import. So this includes hydraulic design calculations. It includes places where we gain parts from. There's lots of standard code that's being imported here. This next step is our tree, and the tree is where we connect the parts of the tree together. So, or we connect smart parts together. This describes what's happening at this level in the Part Studio and connects us to any direct descendants, any children that are connected to this Part Studio. And indeed, if we look down through here, okay, there's a name. So this is being called the Smart Part Tutorial. Looks like we could add a description here, and there's some other items here that are not yet used, but we will be using them in the future. Then here there are designers, and there's a pre-designer and a post-designer, and these connect to functions, and I can hold down the control button and click on these, and it says, hey, this is just at line 35. This is the Smart Part Tutorial pre-designer, and we can add lines of code right here to do things that we want to have calculated as part of this smart part. So those are the two design functions. They can either happen before any children are called or after any children are called. So that's what the distinction is between pre and post. Next thing is, what are the input parameters? So far, this smart part only has inputs of implementation partner, which we're labeling as generic. It could have been Agua para el Pueblo or Gran Vicas, but currently it's just generic. And whether or not we want to replicate any parts that are normally replicated in a design and show them all, or whether we just want to show one copy. And right now we have replicate set to true. And the next step is about children, and there's two pieces about children. One is what order the children should execute in. We currently only have one child, and so that's just placed here inside an array with one element. Technically, execution isn't required if you don't care what order the children execute in.